Welcome, Podlet, the Trusty Ape podcast with Godless Granny. And my first fumble begins. Godless Granny, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone who's joining. See, we got some viewers up here already. That is amazing. So, Godless Granny, you are getting around the atheist community online quite a bit. So let's start by talking about your channel. What do you focus on the Godless Granny YouTube channel?
I have an introduction that's fairly short. It's about 3 minutes long. If you just go on the channel and look at the channel intro, and that tells you a little bit about it. And I kind of am a jack of all trades, master of none. Although there is one subject in which I do have considerable expertise. I do have a law degree, and I did work for quite a while in the insurance field. But unfortunately, my expertise really has nothing to do with atheism. My expertise is in workers' compensation. But I like to chime in a lot on just about anything that interests me. I am a trans parent, so I frequently talk about transgender issues. I feel very strongly about atheism and about feminism, and I think that there are some very definite conflicts between feminism and Christianity. I don't know very much about Islam, and while I think it's a rather repulsive religion, I don't talk about it much because I really don't know that much about it. Every once in a while, I dabble a little bit into refuting pseudoscience, but I don't have much of a science background, so I only go after things that are just so blatantly obvious that even someone like me can see it.
Got you. That's a lot to tackle. So you, as I understand it, you were raised in a secular household. Is that right?
Yeah, it was kind of mixed. My parents were Catholic when I was very young, and they left the Catholic Church when I was about 7. So through most of my formative years, I was raised in a secular home. Although my mom always clung to a little bit of her Catholic religion in that she said, if you're going to believe, you have to believe Catholic because Catholic is the one true religion. But I don't really believe in Catholicism. I just believe that if you're going to believe, you have to be Catholic. I always thought that was kind of funny. But my dad kind of had a journey through a number of different secular areas, and I would definitely call my dad as a deist because he really does think there is some kind of higher power out there, but what that higher power is, he would not begin to define. But for the most part, we didn't go to church. We didn't talk much about religion at all as a kid. But when I was 16, that was in the middle of the I Found It movement. And some of my friends told me all about Jesus. And so I converted to Christianity at 16. And I was a devout Christian for 42 years. And it's actually my youngest child that drew me away from Christianity. Because my youngest child gave up Christianity and was afraid to tell me and started showing me a few things, showed me Pelagia and showed me Vice Rhino, showed me Aaron Ra, and I started looking at them. And when my son showed me this video of the ARC protest, and I was listening to Aaron Ra, and in the beginning, I really couldn't understand much of what he was saying because without the science background, too much of the vocabulary was going over my head. But the big thing that did get to me was that banner. There was this huge banner that said Genesis and Incest Park. And at first, when I looked at that banner, I said, "Whoa, you got to be kidding!" Yeah, I don't really agree with Ken Ham. I'm not a young Earth creationist, but that's just going too far. But I started thinking about it, and I thought, yeah, I guess they're right. I guess the flood story is a story about genocide, and I guess the repopulating of the Earth after the flood would have to have been an incest event, and it just got me to thinking in a way that was different than I had ever thought before.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, quickly here, I'm going to give a shout out to the chat.
I
I
also
see
credit.
Atheist Mo, Theo, and Critical Cripple. Thank you for joining. Sorry, go ahead.
I credit comedians with a lot of the turning of my thinking from being a fundamentalist to becoming much more liberal. Uh, my son that showed me the atheist community, a couple years before that, showed me one of his favorite comedians, which was, gosh, see if I can even remember his name. His show got canceled, so we don't watch it anymore. He used to be on The Daily Show, and then he got his own show. I can't remember his name at the moment. Um, and I started watching him, and then when I mentioned to my daughter that I liked him, my daughter said, "Oh, well, then you should watch John Oliver and watch Last Week Tonight." And I started watching that, and I think John Oliver had a huge impact on the way that I think as well.
Wow, yeah, nice. I was going to say, I think maybe you were talking about Stephen Colbert originally,
No,
the
no.
satire. No.
Tall, skinny, white guy, pretty young. Gosh, what was his
Oh,
name?
yeah. Critical Cripple is John
Yeah,
Stewart. Is that what you're
it's
thinking of?
not Jon
It's
Stewart.
not John Stewart. Okay.
I can't remember his name. I wish my son was in the chat. I could ask because he would know immediately who I'm talking about.
Maybe we'll get to the bottom of it. Okay.
Eventually, the name of the show will come to me, and when it does, I'll shout it out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a satire comedy has a great effect for that. For me, like I feel like that's the way you're probably
The
going to get to a lot of
Opposition.
religious people rather than
His show was called The Opposition.
Okay.
That's what started it. See, I told you I'd shout it out as soon as I could remember.
At least we got the name of the show, so we can check it out.
Well, all I have to do is Jordan Klepper.
Okay. Now I know who you're talking about. I think he was the one who was going out to like Trump rallies, right? And
Yes, he was. It was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. And people thinking that he was supporting them when he was mocking them, and they didn't even get it.
Right. All right, so I want to maybe rewind a little bit and just ask, like, going back to when you were 16, when you did start getting heavily into Christianity. Was there an event, like a turning point in your life that led you to that? Was there like any type of personal experience, whether like?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, really. What turned me to Christianity was in my 10th grade English class. We had a teacher who was one of the laziest teachers you could possibly ever meet. He passed out textbooks to us that had a self-study program in them. And he said, "Do this. If you need anything, I'll be in the back of the room." And he went to the back of the room and sat down. If you had any questions, you go and ask him. Other than that, you just went through the textbook, you wrote the essays, you turned in your essays, and when he graded them, he gave them back. And we pretty much had a self-paced class, and we could do what we wanted in the class. Well, we were seated alphabetically. And the guy that was sitting in front of me, his last name started with an M, and mine at that time started with an O. And that's the only reason he happened to pick me to tell his newfound faith to, because I happened to be sitting right behind him. And he took all of my study materials off of my desk, and he said, "You're going to sit there and you're going to listen to me." And he told me all about his Christian faith, and I really didn't have any choice in the matter, unless I wanted to go back and tell the teacher, which I was much too embarrassed to do. But he said one thing to me that really got to me, and that was, he said, "There's something missing in your life." And at the time, I was very close to suicide. I had a razor blade hidden in my bedroom, just waiting for the opportune time to use it. And so when he said, that there was something missing in my life, I thought there had to have been a supernatural power that told him about this, because this guy doesn't know me. And yet he knows that there's something wrong with my life, and I haven't told anyone. And I had not shared with anyone how I was feeling. And so that's what turned me to Christianity is I really thought that he had some kind of insight from a God about this. And it's interesting, he's an atheist now too.
Oh wow, so you still speak to this person? Okay.
Not really. I haven't. I tried. I think I found him when I went searching for him about 5 years ago, and I sent him a letter, but I didn't get a response. So I don't know if I found him for sure or not. But I do know that a friend. I do know someone who was a friend of his that had contact with him just like 5 years after I graduated from high school, and that person told me that he was no longer a believer. And that was way back then.
All right. So you mentioned your kind of lame teacher there, which got me thinking that was something I wanted to ask you about. 'Cause it sounds like I thought maybe from watching your videos that you had a background as an educator. So that doesn't sound like that's the case.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. You're definitely very talented at it. I would describe most of your videos as educational.
I do try to be educational, and even though I have never been in formal education, I have taught Sunday school for decades, and I've taught women's Bible studies for decades. So I have been in teaching positions, just not formal teaching positions. I actually did want to be a teacher when I was in high school, but my dad talked me out of it. He had a very low opinion of teachers. He felt that teachers were just people who couldn't do anything better. And
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe sometimes that's the case, but it's sad the underappreciation and undercompensation for teachers, especially here in the United States. So that's one thing that definitely drives the more I lost the word there, more qualified people away from the profession. Sorry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think his opinion came from the fact that he grew up going to Catholic schools. And I think a lot of his teachers were nuns rather than teachers. And yeah, he didn't have a very good school experience.
Yeah. So when I'm sorry, it was your grandchild, right? That actually started turning you away from this.
My son.
Oh, your son. Sorry.
Mhm.
Okay. So how long would you say did the transition take? Is there kind of a measurable length of time there?
That's really hard to say. Because if you want to look at from the point that I started considering atheism to the point where I became an atheist, that was a very short period of time. However, the steps that slowly turned me from being a fundamentalist to being a liberal, the steps where I was evolving my theology because my theology wasn't in line with reality, those took several years.
Right.
So the steps took years, but the actual decision to be an atheist was almost instantaneous.
And you mentioned feminism earlier. Is that something that came about later on? That came out of your converting away from the faith?
No, it didn't. I've always been a feminist. My mother was a feminist, and that was one thing I did find a little bit difficult within the religion. Explaining some feminine viewpoints and having men just totally not get it. Because my husband was in the army for 26 years. And one of the things that I said was, I really am bothered by the way that they, particularly drill sergeants, put down the men by calling them women. Being a woman is not a shameful thing to be. And my husband did not get that I found that offensive. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, it's I guess there's a reason they call it toxic masculinity. Yeah, I always found it funny. Well, I mean, as a kid, I was really sensitive about it, but growing up, how because I was raised by a single mother, and getting teased a lot in the school, they call you mama's boy or something like that, and it's like, why would that even be offensive. Why would that bug me? I don't know.
Mm.
So,
Have you ever read Kevin Jennings' book, Mama's Boy's Preacher's Son?
no, I don't think so.
I think you might like that. His mother was really quite an incredible woman.
Right.
Unfortunately, she was never formally educated, and so she never was able to develop herself as much as a person as she should have been able to. Um, that is one book that I also credit with a lot of the turn in my thinking. Um, and I've mentioned this on a couple of streams. One of the things that started me, especially on the issue of homosexuality, first I read Christopher Yuan's book, Out of a Far Country. And most atheists and most liberal people would find his book absolutely appalling because his conclusion is it's okay to be gay as long as you don't act on it, as long as you remain celibate. And that is the advice that he gives to people. But if you are starting from the position that being gay is absolutely wrong, it does open the door to realizing that no, people are gay through no fault of their own. And once that door is open, that's what opened me up to reading Kevin Jennings' book. Kevin Jennings is the founder of the Gay Straight Alliance, and that's an anti-bullying group. And his goal is to get into schools, and they really push a very strong anti-bullying agenda. And it's not just over the gay straight issue, even though it's called Gay Straight Alliance. But that is the primary thrust, is to try to build a bridge between the gay and the straight community. I was thinking about the possibility of trying to introduce a gay straight alliance into my son's Christian school. Who could be against bullying? But I didn't have the guts to try to. And I know the administration never would have gone for it. They were far too fundamental. Theo's
Theo
right.
says, yeah, that door must be opened.
And once
And
that
I
door
think
was open, then Kevin's book is what taught me that not only is it okay to be gay, but it's okay to be gay married. Gay people could be Christians, and I was much more open after reading Kevin's book.
Yeah, I think we've made a lot of ground, at least in my lifetime, on that particular issue. But we have this new issue, and you may have maybe a perspective on this, where now it seems there's a clash between these new feminists and the transgender community, where they're saying that transgender people can't be who they say they are, and it's undermining them. What do you think about that?
I think that people who say that don't understand the transgender community. If you can't understand that a trans woman is a woman, not a man pretending to be a woman, not a man who's in the process of becoming a woman, a trans woman is a woman, period, end of question. And so someone who is truly a feminist should be just as supportive of trans women as any other women. To be anti-trans women to me is like being anti-Asian women, or I know they don't like drawing a parallel to race because you don't have any choice whatsoever in race, but I don't think transgender people really have a choice in how they feel either.
Yes, similarly to how you do not choose to be homosexual or heterosexual, right? I mean, it's
Right.
ingrained in your
It's just who
personality.
you are. Mm-hmm. I do think, though, that there is a big parallel between the gender revolution of today and the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. In the 60s and 70s, there was a huge generation gap as the young people were expressing their sexuality differently than what their parents understood. And their parents just totally didn't get the free sex movement. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing today with the gender movement.
And maybe in some ways with the atheist movement as well. It seems almost as if that's going in reverse, though. I see more people online who are older who have been religious and come away from that, and then a lot of the newer uh, people that I see proselytizing and doing apologetics are actually younger than myself. Have you noticed that at all?
Um, Not really, but that's probably because of who I'm acquainted with. Yeah, the people that I watch definitely are. The vast majority of them are younger than me, but I'm old. Um, but not all that young. Not like my son's age.
Right.
There's a 12-year gap between my son and my daughters. I had a daughter, and then I had another daughter, and then 12 years later, I had my son. And he was planned, by the way. He was no accident. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Um, so they're almost of two different generations.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I have a brother as well who's 18 years younger than I am. So, that's,
So you know that exactly.
yeah. Um, all right, you've got a very exciting event coming up. You said this is this coming Tuesday with Matt Dillahunty.
Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, I will be hosting Matt Dillahunty, Katie Montgomery, Esther the African Humanist, Brainbug, and Scientist Mel for another episode of Why Are We Here? Why Are We Here is a monthly show that I put on where I try to get together a couple of people that are huge in the community and a couple of people who are smaller in the community and put them together, and we talk about what we're doing here and why we're doing it. And I really wanted to have Matt and Esther together, and I was so thrilled that I was able to get the two of those together because Esther is brand new and
Yeah, that's
she
awesome.
is a rising star in this community. I think she's really going to have a voice here.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed her videos very much as well. That's awesome. And this isn't the first time you've had
Wow.
a pretty big panel on, right? Yeah, Atheist Mo, family of 11.
Hmm.
That's huge.
Yeah, I've had a number of panels of 6. I had only intended that to be a panel of 5, but I decided to add one more, and so ended up with 6. But 6 works too. Once you get more than 6, though, I think it gets difficult to get your views in edgewise.
Yeah, managing the conversation, and I found even with more than 4. I mean, I don't know if sometimes it's an issue with just like the connection, but I'll have I can hear maybe 2 or 3 people in the room, and then the other people will be just kind of fuzzing out over each other.
I had one stream where I spent 20 minutes trying to end it.
I definitely see that. Jeez. So I guess we went through quite a lot in a short period of time, so I'm trying to get my bearings here. When you started doing this, okay, so we'll go back a little bit from the time that you discovered the online content and decided you were an atheist. When did you decide immediately you were going to go online and start doing videos, or what was the
No,
progression of
not
that?
immediately, but it didn't take very long. I first started watching some of the online content, and I was amazed at how quickly I was able to learn some of it. Because like I mentioned that I had a hard time understanding R and Raw because the vocabulary was just over my head, and so I started watching Professor Sick, Simply Stated, and Vice Rhino and Pelagia, and learning just a little bit of science background so that I could understand what Aaron was talking about. And I loved Aaron's phylogeny series, and I've told him this personally that the first 3 videos in the series, I had to watch them 3 times because the vocabulary was so far over my head that I just had to keep looking up words. But once I got through the first 3 and I understood the vocabulary of the first 3, then I could go through all the rest much more quickly, and it was fascinating. I learned so much from that series. Um, but watching all of it, one of the things that I heard from a couple of them was that we don't have enough women in the atheist community that are content creators. And, I could see that there were not a lot of women. And I said, hey, I'll throw my hat in the ring then. And I happen to live in the same city as Godless Engineer. So I contacted him and I took him and his wife, Casey, out to dinner and asked him, how do you do this? And his big thing is stand up and use your voice. I mean, that's his theme. And so when I said that I was interested, he was all for supporting me, and he told me how to do it, what kind of equipment I needed. Well, not so much what I needed, is he suggested some videos of where I could go to find out, what I wanted to get. And from that, I figured out what to buy and, how to get started. And one of the things that I've mentioned is that I swear I find a new button on my editing video, or editing software every time. And so almost every video you see, you'll find some new editing trick that I've learned.
Awesome.
Right now, I need to learn how to do keyframing. And I've watched a couple of videos on keyframing, but I don't know how to do it yet. And I do need to sit down with the video and step by step figure out how to do that.
I'm not even sure I know what keyframing is. I mean, it seems like I have a concept of it in my head, but I'm probably wrong.
It lets you move something across the screen.
Okay.
My editing software has some built-in keyframing things where I can just take what, a keyframing mod, I'm not sure what you call it, and put it right into the video. But if I knew how to keyframe, then I could move things exactly where I wanted them. For example, there was one video I did where I was juggling some fruit in the fruit is just pictures.
Right.
But I couldn't make the fruit do exactly what I wanted it to do. I wanted to make the fruit go around in a circle like I was juggling it. But the preset animations, none of them went in a circle. But I could make them so that I threw them up and they just made circles in the air, because that was preset in there.
Yeah, it's interesting working with the editing. If you know the programming, it's easier for those people. You could just go into like OBS or whatever and set up their own canvas and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm pretty. As you can see, I'm low tech here, so I'm still working on getting an editing software going and stuff. So, but I am more high tech thanks to you. And at this point in the show, I will thank you. Here you have supported my laptop fund. So just so everybody knows, Godless Granny has made this show possible in more ways than one. So thank you again for that.
You're welcome.
And coming up on the 30-minute mark, so we'll just announce again that Tuesday you're going to be having Matt Dillahunty and Katie Montgomery on your channel for Why Are We Here?
Mm-hmm.
And you can subscribe to Godless Granny and follow her on Twitter. The link's in the description below if you have not yet. Are there any other announcements you'd like to make before we go?
I've got another video that I just uploaded to my patrons, which means I will release it. I released it to my patrons about 2 hours ago. And so I will release it to the public sometime tomorrow. And it's called God's Rejects. I go through the theology of Paul Washer, where he talks about God chooses you. And I said, let's start thinking about the flip side of God chooses you, which is God rejects everybody else.
Awesome. Look out for that. Thank you so much again for coming on, Granny. And thank you, everybody, for watching now or in the future. And I'm going to try to wrap this up gracefully here. So enjoy your day, be well, and stay trusty, my friends. And we'll see you next time.
Live your life.